In March, the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime, they released the quarterly Western Cape Gang Monitor report. It covers findings of what's been happening in the daily realities of many Cape Townians. And from what I note from a very interesting graphic released by GTalk is that gang membership, organised crime is literally in every corner of the Cape Metro, from Ocean View to Camps Bay to Kraaifontein, Fisantekraal in Durbanville, all the way to Strand, Nomzamo. Literally every corner of this metro, often centered around the Cape Flats. Jenni Irish-Qhobosheane is the senior expert at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. Just looking at the graphic that you've put out, we have particular, as has been historically, concentration of organised crime, street gangs in the Cape Flats, the centre of the Cape Peninsula, but very and quite vividly in every single corner of this Cape Metro, we have some sort of street gang footprint. Jenni, good morning.
Morning to you and your listeners.
You've particularly been focusing on the Fancy Boys gangs, seen as some sort of second-tier gang. Gangs like the Americans, the Hard Livings, have been entrenched in our communities and organised crime since, the 1980s already. But why we're seeing this flourishing of these smaller gangs going up in the ranks in the hierarchy of gang culture in Cape Town, Jenni?
So I think if you look at the Fancy Boys in particular, what we're seeing is there's always been a degree of fragmentation in gangs, amongst gangs, where you have smaller gangs developing, you have gangs taking over other gangs' territory, and often that relates to the way in which the hierarchical structure in which gangs operate, and the fact that the top echelons of the gangs often receive the maximum profits from what is going on, and then you have lower level gang members who actually are dissatisfied with the situation and either get recruited by rival gangs or they actually break away and form smaller gangs. But what we've seen since about 2022 is a gang like the Fancy Boys in particular has gone on a massive recruitment drive. And we've seen, in the Western Cape, over a 3-month period, we've seen from October, our gang monitor has recorded 1,545 incidents of gang-related violence. And when it comes to this takeover of territory and by the Fancy Boys, what we're seeing is that they are going on a massive recruitment drive, and we're seeing them strengthen their hand in areas like Manenberg, West Bank, Woodstock, parts of Mitchell's Plain, Ocean View, etc. And that is quite unprecedented, even to the extent where what we've seen is some of the older gangs and more established gangs like the Hard Livings and the 28s actually even banding together to actually deal with the expansion of the Fancy Boys into areas like Manenberg.
Jenni, we have a couple of cases currently underway involving alleged gang leaders. Nafis Modak currently on trial. Ralph Stanfield, alleged leader of the 28s gang, he's currently on trial. What impact is the prosecution of these senior leaders having on the footprint of the foot soldiers of gangs in Cape Town?
Look, I do think that if you look, for example, at the Modak and the Stanfield cases, they are possibly some of the strongest cases that we've seen in the prosecution of gangs for quite some time. Both have been denied bail. Both have been prosecutory-led investigations that led to their arrests. And I think that those are incredibly positive steps. That isn't to say that those gang bosses still can't actually run operations from prison, but I think there is a big significance in, for example, the Stanfield case. Obviously, we still have to see what happens with the actual prosecution and whether additional charges are thrown at Stanfield and how that prosecution is going to play itself out. But I think it needs to be accompanied by similar strategies targeting both other senior gang members as well as some of the other senior echelons in the gangs if we're going to see this having any serious impact.
Jenni, there's a powerful tool in the Prevention of Organised Crime Act, POCA legislation. And I don't know if it's a misnomer, but when it was introduced, I think in the 1998, around about early 2000s, it was supposed to be this legislation that if you're even part of a gang, or we can confirm that you are part of a gang, that is sufficient for us to then prosecute and then put you away. It seems to be far more intricate and far more forensic than that. Organized crime is part of a broader economy, an organized crime that uses very intricate forensic tools to hide crimes. Is POCA working at the moment, particularly to target high flyers?
I think that POCA does work. I think we've seen it targeting some significant high flyers with good results. But I think that also it often involves quite complex investigations and complex prosecutions, and so sometimes you will find that going for the alternatives like what they've done with Stanfield, where they haven't initially charged him under POCA, whether they're still going to throw some POCA charges against him we're still waiting to see. But where they've charged him under some of the, for some under some common law crimes, that can also get people off the streets, certainly in the interim. I mean, POCA still has a significant role to play, and we've seen some good prosecution results after POCA, but there are complex investigations, often take quite a lot of time to unwind. So using a combination of both strategies, I think, is not a bad thing.
You also in your report write about we can't disregard the culpability, police being complicit. We've recently seen a spate of thefts of firearms from police stations in Mitchell's Plain. In Bellville, of course, we had the case a couple of years ago. Christoph, I think it's Vansel, the senior police officer who was charged. He's since already been released on parole, sentenced to 18 years. But what role is police playing actively to aid and abet gang activity currently that you're seeing in your report, Jenni?
So I think one of our big concerns is that what we're seeing is that gangs have always had access to a supply of firearms, albeit until the last decade and a half in quite limited supplies. What we're seeing now is that gangs are much more heavily armed than we've seen in the past. And definitely there is an aspect of collusion with the police in terms of arming those gangs. The Christian Princely case that you referred to earlier, where from his own testimony, 2,400 guns were distributed to gangs in the Western Cape. Our research indicates that it was significantly more than that 2,400 and may have been closer to 9,000 guns that were distributed to gangs. Those all came out of police stores. Those were all guns coming out of police stores. We are incredibly concerned about leakages from the police and also from other government departments, and how that fuels gang violence. Also how the lines between legal and illegal firearms are becoming blurred. We see in the Stanfield firearms case where Stanfield and a number of his associates are being charged for their ability to access firearm licenses through corruption in the Central Firearm Registry. We are concerned about the fact that the case against Modak, which was a massive case involving more than 18 police officers, has actually been withdrawn largely on a technicality. And so firearms is definitely a factor in fueling the levels and the way we're seeing gun violence play itself out.
Jenni Irish-Qhobosheane, senior expert at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. Really appreciate your time.